It is Brian Shannon from alphatrends.net. Today is Friday, the 2nd of July, 2021, and we had another strong week for the markets as the Nasdaq and the S&P gained good ground, the biotechs as well. The one area of weakness was the Russell 2000, which is kind of surprising. We'll take a look at that in a moment. I'll show you why I think it was surprising that it had failed in here today and finished lower for the week. The S&P 500, of course, is at a new all-time high. Looking at a 15-minute time frame, this is the week-to-date volume-weighted average price. Obviously began at the beginning of the week, and we have this powerful uptrend that continues to show no sign of reversing. Our job is not to try to pick a top, but instead to enjoy the ride that we're on and manage risk by raising stops up above the most recent relevant higher low for the time frame that you're engaged in the market on. The Nasdaq also at a new all-time high here. This market just relentless buyers. We dipped briefly below the week-to-date volume-weighted average price yesterday, but of course held this rising 5-day moving average. And when that 5-day moving average is rising, it is innocent until proven guilty. Today, again, we're at all-time highs. You just cannot argue with that type of strength. You can put up every bearish argument you want, but you will be defeated over and over again, as you have been when the market is in an uptrend, meaning that, don't fight the trend. Our job is, again, to manage risk along the way. The Russell 2000 is mentioned, this one, the bigger picture, we're still in this bigger range, and we are still possibly creating, we have this higher low, in the midpoint of the range. And if this can continue to prove to be this week's pullback a higher low, then I think that we will see the Russell 2000 continue to follow the rest of the market. Now, what I was hoping for was something like this, perhaps creating an inverted head and shoulders. And I'd also outlined the point that, we wanted to see it break higher today. Instead, it failed. It's below the declining 5-day moving average. As mentioned, the low from this week is going to be important next week. I wouldn't say it's a, throw your stocks away if it breaks below it by any means, because again, the daily time frame, we have the rising 20, 50, 100, 200-day moving average, and consolidations in a range can typically resolve in the direction of the primary trend. The primary trend, of course, you look at the weekly time frame, it's higher. There's no arguing that. But what I think we might see is if we break below that, oftentimes, oftentimes we see a cheap new low, and then it turns back higher. And that would be actually a preferred scenario at this point, because it would give the opportunity for a little bit of a shakeout and move stock into stronger hands for an eventual break higher. So keep a close eye on the Russell 2000 next week. Semiconductors, they broke that little trend line that we discussed last week. This is our higher low. We're getting a nice rally off of that, slowing down just a little bit here, but still clearly above any important level. Biotechs continue to move higher. This week they're just grinding higher, and these are the levels that I've been raising stops up underneath. I think that at this point you could probably get away with your stop, instead of way down here at this point, probably below Thursday's low, which is the higher low with a rising 5-day moving average. On the daily time frame, this is kind of what I'm expecting. I think we're going to go back to these highs. We're not going to go in a straight line. We'll see a series of higher highs and higher lows, as we typically do. The individual names, again, just some incredible strength today. Great move in Amazon, looking like it's ready to continue to lead the Nasdaq higher. I had mentioned Ambarella is one to keep an eye on for next week. Here we see the volume weighted average price off of this high. It has absorbed that and also holding above the year-to-date volume weighted average price. Next week, what I'd like to see here, we're looking at a 30-minute time frame. And I'd like to see it get above Wednesday's high. If it can do that, maybe the scenario for that would be something like this. Again, we always want to see a series of higher lows before a breakout. We want that range to constrict as tight as possible for two reasons. One, the energy builds in that range, and two, we have a higher low to protect ourselves with a stop against. I had mentioned on Twitter that I think this would be an absolute worst case stop scenario. That is below the low that it made last week. That's this low right here. Personally, I would, most likely worst case for me would be right up in here. And again, if we saw this type of scenario, I'd like to have my stop under here and be a buyer up above this level at that point. This is something I'll continue to update for Alpha Trend subscribers as it develops. I'd also mentioned ALKS, this one on Twitter, that we saw a break of this 2-year range that stage 1 accumulation. We saw the breakout into a stage 2 uptrend, and then on the daily time frame, it was coming out of this little we saw this rally, and we don't buy pullbacks. We buy after the pullback once it develops strength. Why take the risk and tie up your money in non-performing stocks while they're in the midst of a pullback? Instead, I put it on Twitter saying, right in here, that I like this stock now and I'm long it. I think that you could probably raise your stop up under this point, which is underneath today's low, today being Friday, of course. Other names to keep an eye on, I mean, there's just a big list of them. One is Fate, F-A-T-E, kind of looks very similar to Ambarella. Fate, you look at the weekly time frame, it had a deep pullback to the rising 40-week or 200-day moving average. Over to the daily time frame, there's that 200-day moving average, and it had that, that break below it. That's kind of the type of break that I was talking about in the Russell 2000 that I'd like to see. It rallied up, created a higher low, broke through. Now we have this as a higher low from Thursday's low. Now I'm looking for a reasonable place to get involved in here. It's good to see that this prior resistance holding a support. I think you protect yourself with a stop probably just under $90 per share, if that's one that makes sense to you. First Solar is another name that kind of looks similar again on the weekly chart. Deep pullback. It's rebuilt. It's back above the year-to-date volume weighted average price. That's that blue line. You can see that held as resistance. And now on the 15-minute time frame, slight consolidation here after a good rally, maybe back above the high of the last couple days, maybe above 91.75-ish. I think you could put your stop under Thursday's low for a swing trade if it does continue to set up. And there's a lot that goes into this. It's not just one or two things. It's not one time frame. It's about seeing an expansion of volume as the stock rallies, followed by lighter volume consolidations. That tells us there's not an urgency to get out, that we're seeing just some normalized profit taking, and that there's buyers still in there because the depth of the pullback is pretty shallow right now. So a lot of names, again, I could go on and on here. OPCH is one that looks nice on a longer term time frame. That might be a little bit more speculative. PAY, a recent IPO, nice pullback consolidation here the last day. Volume might be a little light actually at 315,000 shares. Probably not one I would trade. Porch Group, PRCH. This one looking like it's building some energy as well. If it can kind of break these these highs, we have this this energy building once again in here onto a 15-minute time frame. Let's say maybe it got back above today's high with a stop under here. That might be one way to trade it. You can look at this 30-minute time frame, and this looks like a big cup and a handle right here. So I point those patterns out when I see them, but I'm not like a pattern junkie who's just looking for patterns. It's more about understanding the process of what's going on behind the scenes. Sientra is one that I had mentioned. It had a big rally this week, right up to this prior high, and then my theory is that the short sellers came in because they have a large position in it and were able to squash that rally on Thursday. Today it came back. You can see that if we take this stuff off the volume weighted average price from the beginning of this move, we're right up to it. So I'm still holding some call options in here. Maybe it does something like this next week and continues to rally, and then the second mouse gets the cheese as this one breaks higher. Looking at the longer term trend, it looks like it's capable of still moving higher. I've got a bunch of other names. I'm going to put together a video like I do for subscribers to Alpha Trends and outline in detail how we want to trade those. Hope you have a good 4th of July weekend and enjoy the extra day off. Thanks for listening.